Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Free Thinking with Montel. I'm your host, Montel Williams, where we explore the critical issues that shape our world. Well, today we're tackling a profoundly important and timely topic, America's mental health crisis. In recent years, we've witnessed increasing partisanship and aggression threatening our nation. But America doesn't have to be this way. There is hope. Today, we'll discuss why the declining state of America's mental health is a crucial missing piece from the national political discourse, and while deteriorating mental health poses the greatest threat to our continued survival. Our guest today is a psychotherapist with 34 years of experience. She holds a master's degree in psychology and counseling, co-directed the Parents United program, a family sexual abuse treatment program, before transitioning to full-time private practice. Now retired, she focuses on writing and speaking. She's written 2 books chronicling her personal healing journey, and her 3rd book, America in Therapy, presents an unprecedented perspective envisioning an entire nation as a patient in dire need of therapy. Phyllis Leavitt, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for participating in Free Thinking with Montel today.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's really an honor. Thank you.
No, thank you. And Phyllis, I got to tell you something. If you were to go back and talk to I'm telling you, almost everybody who knows me for the last 10 years, I have been talking about the fact that America has been sliding into the abyss of national depression, and nobody's been paying attention to this. We have literally seen a nation that has now turned into this angry, volcanic, almost vitriolic, partisan place where everything seems to be, to me, and I just actually released a video yesterday about it, everything seems to me to be just filled with hate. And I don't understand why. And part of it, I think, is because of this national depression that I've been talking about for now almost 10 years. You envision America as a patient in therapy. Can you tell me a little bit more about this metaphor and how it's going to help us understand our national divisions and declining state of mental health?
Yeah, I would love to. And let me start by saying that one of the gifts of psychology is that it's not invested in who's winning and who's losing. The whole field of psychology is about healing relationships. It's about fostering deep communication. It's about helping people resolve the wars they're in with themselves or with the people around them. It helps people resolve the pain that they've been acting out in ways that don't work in their own lives. And if we bring that lens to America, I think what we're looking at, and with all the things that you just mentioned, we're looking at a national state of ill mental health. And the reason why I say that is because mentally and emotionally healthy people don't shoot each other. They don't call each other horrible names. They don't hate. They have a tolerance. They have not only a tolerance, but sometimes even a celebration of our diversity. Mentally and emotionally healthy people are safe for one another. They're a place where people can go and, talk about what's true and real for them without fear of being harmed. And so when we look at what's going on in the country today, we see just the opposite in some of the institutions of the greatest power that are role modeling what we would call in the world of psychology, highly dysfunctional and abusive family dynamics. And we know from the field of psychology, I'm certainly not alone in this, that when people are mistreated, when they're abused, when they're hated, when they're ostracized, when they're deprived of the necessities of life, when they have no access to safety or rescue from the things that are hurting them, they become symptomatic. and we have a population of highly symptomatic people. And you mentioned one of the very important pieces of that, and that is a lot of depression. And there are other symptoms that are equally tragic for Americans. And really what I'm talking about is worldwide, but I'm speaking to America because this is the country I know and where I live.
Phyllis, is there a time when you think that this all kind of started? Is there something that triggered it? I mean, because from my perspective, I got to tell you something. I've been talking about this now for close to 20 years. And I feel like our media has had a inordinate effect on the state of our mental health. And I think from my perspective, it seemed to have begun, somewhere around 63, 64. If you go back to Martin Luther King's death, you go back to John F. Kennedy's death. I was a young child at the time, but I will never forget this. I remember being in elementary school and then pushing a television screen into our classroom. I'm a second grader, and they pushed a television screen into our classrooms and made little kids watch a man's head explode on TV. We saw the death of a president. Everybody mourned and it was so terrible. And then from that point on, though, if you remember, if you thought about television before that, there were shows like the FBI, there were all these Westerns. Whenever you saw, a police officer shoot somebody, they fell behind a car. And then the camera would have an angle from the ground up looking at the two police officers. Yeah, I think he's dead. I think he's dead. You never look back down at the dead body. But from that moment on, television showed us every dead body it could show us. Vietnam showed us, the hatred and riots in the streets. Go through Nixon, showed us all the bad that was happening. The country was in turmoil, and we got to see it. You saw dogs biting people. You saw police turning fire hoses on people. We literally started basically forcing down the throats of viewers every horrible vision that you could see. But not only were we forcing it down the throat, but the viewer were demanding more images. From that point on, now all of a sudden, every movie we saw, we didn't see movies anymore. I can remember movies, where, you used to see them shoot at the guy on a horse riding away. He fell off the horse. Now, when they shoot at the guy, his head explodes. And every single aspect of the most vile imagery that we could shove on people, we started shoving on people to the point that, now people walking around with phones get to see it on TikTok and see whatever nasty that they want to see. We are walking around basically teaching the people of the world how to be depressed.
Right. And I think, I don't know that there's any one place where it began. I mean, one of the things about good therapy, and one of the many reasons why I'm looking at America through the lens of what we understand about our psychology, is that we almost always start with getting a history. What happened to a person early on in their childhood? What were the big factors in their conditioning, for better or for worse? Did someone, a parent die when they were really young? Were they a talented musician who got a lot of praise? How did their family deal with conflict? What were the role models for men and women? What were the most significant things that happened to them when they were young that shaped the way they feel about themselves and the coping mechanisms that they developed in order to deal with what happened to them? And the worse that those things are, if there's abuse, if there's neglect, if there's discrimination coming in on the family, if there's extreme poverty, then people take on very negative things about themselves and about others and about how to cope in the world, whether they isolate or they become highly aggressive or they lapse into powerlessness out of fear of, asserting themselves. And so we have a highly symptomatic population. And so when we see things like that, and there is a fascination for sure in human beings with the dark side, there's also a fascination with the light side. And people, we love stories of redemption. We love stories of when people made it through the worst odds and came out on top or had a great success or finally.
We do, and excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we do love those stories, but unfortunately we see less and less of them.
That's right.
I just did a video yesterday and released it yesterday talking about the fact that, honestly, when you turn on the news, I don't care whether you get your news from TikTok, you get it from Facebook, you get it from YouTube, you get it from, cable news services or terrestrial news services. It used to be a saying in news, if it bleeds, it leads.
That's right.
And that was how producers used to produce television. But you would turn on 6 o'clock news, they would hit you with the ugliest story that they
That's
could
right.
at the top of the series to get your attention. Now, I think if it divides, it
That's
thrives.
right.
Because you look at the news today, I don't care what the outlet is, it is the most divisive platform that anybody can be a part of. And we applaud it. It's like, I get sick of hearing certain stations that are on one side or the other side. Literally, they open their news up attacking the side that they don't like.
Right.
And they use as much inflammatory verbiage that they can to get you inflamed, to keep you watching them instead of changing your
Right.
channel. And how do we expect our mental health to stay static
Right.
and not be dynamic if we just keep flooding, everything you see this way?
I totally agree with you. And that's one of the big reasons why I wrote my book, because I don't know that the average person really knows the terrible impact that that's having on our collective mental health, to be exposed over and over again to vitriol and hatred and threats and images of violence. We know on the family level that if children are exposed to that in their home, in their community, on TV, in the media, that it has a profoundly devastating effect on their mental health and well-being. And if we had, if you were talking about an individual family where the parents were just constantly showing their children pictures of murder, we would say, what's wrong with them? There's something mentally disturbed about that environment that they're creating for their children. And then when their children become symptomatic, often what happens when children or any adults are mistreated or exposed to really toxic kinds of environments, they become symptomatic, and then often they're blamed for their symptoms instead of us really understanding, like in a medical model, when people have a disease or an injury and they become highly symptomatic, we look for the cause. And it's only in our human relations that we seem not to be doing that. So when does that make sense?
It does make sense, because I'm telling you, you commented on the fact that our deteriorating mental health poses one of the greatest threats to our
Great.
nation's survival.
Mm-hmm.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I think that you nailed it, and unfortunately, it's not resonating, across the board. I mean, I think you should be in every board meeting of every news outlet in America telling them to knock this crap off.
I would like to be, because I care, because I see what's happening to people. Being a therapist, working one-on-one with couples and individuals and children and families for so many years, the level of emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect in our country is actually rampant. And I'm talking about people who look like they're functioning okay. They don't look like they're in pain, but when they walk through my door or any therapist door, what the stories that people tell are sometimes just mind-boggling of what they've endured. And
Let me just jump in one quick second. I mean, and I'm trying not to politicize this, but we both know what we see and what we hear.
Right.
When we have certain politicians who literally begin and end their diatribes with, it's retribution time.
Right.
It's time to get even.
Right.
When we hear this, it almost, for those who have no filters or no ability to process information on their own, it almost is a green light to hate and be as violent as you want. When we have a politician on a stage say, beat the crap out of the news in the back of the room, excuse my mouth, and physically abuse this person, or, I wish that this person could be assassinated, or I wish this person could be killed. I mean, that level of vitriol, that level of hate-filled speech, sent out there and put out there without even the slightest filter from others, I just don't know how do we step back from this?
I think we really have to be informed about where it comes from and how dangerous it is for all of us. The person who goes into a school or a grocery store and randomly shoots people they don't even know is calling for help for our whole society. And it could be any one of us that happens to. None of us are actually safe in an environment that condones and, profits off of images of that kind of violence. And I think many people don't know that. It makes them feel powerful, or it makes them feel like they belong to something that has power if they don't feel powerful in their own lives. But let me share this with you, Montel. One of the big things that I've seen as a therapist over many, many years is that when people are mistreated, whether it's in their family, whether it's in their community, in their school, in their place of worship, in their business, wherever people are mistreated by other human beings, besides all the symptoms that they might have, like depression or anxiety or aggression or obsessiveness, or they become rigid or they become isolated, whatever other symptoms they may develop as a result of being hurt, which we do develop, people seem to tend to fall into two different categories of adaptation to that mistreatment when it's not stopped or healed. And those two categories are, and this is all well known in the field of psychology. I didn't make this up, but this is what I've observed over the years. Either learned helplessness, becoming more and more helpless because they've been so overpowered, they can't even access their own ability to stand up for themselves or speak out, or they've been punished for doing so. Or they are what we call identifying with the aggressor. And they'll do anything not to feel vulnerable, so they tend to take on the behaviors and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people who hurt them. And if you have more and more people in our country, which I believe we are seeing, who are rendered powerless by institutional laws and policies of discrimination or withholding or hatred or violence, and more people who have identified with the aggressor, and these people fit together like a hand in a glove. People who become aggressive look for people they can dominate. And people who are submissive are easy prey for those who are dominating. And sometimes people are both, in the sense that they may be passive, but then they're easily conscripted into being complicit in abuse and neglect. And these are huge psychological trends that I think we really need to identify in our culture, because what we really want to get to is the root of our mistreatment of one another. And one of the things, and so there's many factors, obviously, that contribute to that.
But and doctor, Phyllis, I hear you clearly, but to me, I'm sorry, I happen to be a person that I'm going to be one of those crazy optimists in the sense that I don't want to give up. I don't think that we need to give up on America, but I also don't understand how we can get back from this. The cat's out the bag, the horse is out the gate. They're running down the lines, and you can go, "Oh, blue, come back, oh, blue." He's not coming back. I mean, I don't know how do we convince a nation that can only see right or wrong from their own perspective,
Right.
that there is a middle ground? How do you make people understand that I liken it to, there's an old, I used to work with a gentleman who had a theory that was called the beach ball theory. You know what I mean? When you look at a beach ball, a beach ball has 6 panels on it, 6 different colors, and 3 on one side, 3 on the other side. And if I'm holding the beach ball directly at you and you're looking at your side and I'm looking at my side, I'm going to say my beach ball is, I don't know, red, yellow, orange. Yours is going to say, no, mine is white, blue, green. And I'm going to say, no, that beach ball is red, yellow, orange. You're going to say, no, white, blue, green. I just turn it one panel. Now all of a sudden, I've got an entirely different perspective. But nobody in America is willing to turn that beach ball a panel to understand that I may not see exactly what the other person sees.
Right. And so I think for those people who do, we have to speak out. we have to have a voice. We have to see what impact we can have in our own lives and practice what we preach in our own lives, being loving, being kind, being patient, being tolerant, being generous, being safe for other people to be around. And the big thing that we need to all, learn. And again, I think we're on a steep learning curve. I agree with you. There are times when it looks hopeless, but I don't feel hopeless because I know that inside every baby that's born is a precious human being that only wants love and connection and safety. And that's inside every human being somewhere, even the worst perpetrators of the worst violence. And so what we're looking at, I mean, what I'm talking about are, sometimes it sounds Pollyanna-ish to people that we're talking about love, we're talking about compassion, we're talking about celebration of diversity and welcoming diversity. But actually,
Empathy.
these are the things that are going to save us. And what's really going to save us in that picture is a commitment to nonviolence. And one of the things we know from the field of psychology is that mentally and emotionally healthy people are committed to working out their discrepancies or their disagreements or their conflicts with other people without hurting them. And
But why have we hit a spot right now in our society where those people who are the ones you're talking about, the ones who do believe in love, the ones who do believe in hope, the ones who do believe in empathy, why are they just decided to be subservient to and submissive to this group that is getting all of the press and the eyes on them, making them appear? Because I really firmly believe that we are a larger bell curve than most people think.
right,
I think the extremes are smaller than most people think. There are some people who say, no, it's 50%, 50%. It's not 50%, 50%. If you look at the people who are extreme on one side, extreme on the other side, it's less than probably 12% on either side. The rest of it is a big bell curve of people who literally are in the middle who are saying, why is this happening? But we don't get them to say, what can I do about it?
right. And I think that's probably why you have your show, Free Thinking, because you're inviting, other voices. And that's why I wrote my book. And that's why so many people are out there actually doing enormously good deeds and being philanthropic and generous and self-sacrificing and, volunteering to help. And I think it's up to us, every single one of us, to have those voices be heard. And my book, American Therapy, is my way of trying to have my perspective on exactly what you're talking about be heard, hopefully to a larger audience. Because one of the things that there's so many things that have struck me in the process of writing the book, as well as being a therapist, and that is that we are being conditioned to believe that weapons make us safe, when in fact there's only one thing that makes us safe, and that is safe people.
Let's slow down for a second. Let's take a look at, what are some of the signs of this mass mental illness that we've been talking about? Because I think a lot of people tuning in are going, well, yeah, whatever you guys said, but it's not really that. But the truth of the matter is, I think again, those who don't want to listen and hear don't understand. So give some of the signs that you see this mass mental illness, what represents this.
Yeah. I'm going to start with a big one, and that is it goes back to something that you were sharing earlier when you were talking about what's on the media and, that we're looking for blood or we're looking for, more divisiveness, and that's what people tune in to see. And so what I want to say about that is that we really need, let me back up for 1 second. So for most things, like our computers, our cars, medicine, space travel, we want the highest tech everything, right? New phone comes out, you want it immediately. A faster car or better apps or whatever. We love high tech. And from my point of view, the only place where we haven't actually asked as Americans and really as a human species is for high-tech human relations. When a car blows, we want to know what happened to the engine, and we want an engine that won't do that. or when a computer fails, what happened to the motherboard or whatever. But when a person blows, we just blame them. We just say they're a bad person or they're a sinner or they should be locked up and throw away the key instead of saying, what happened? And how can we address what happened in that person? How did they go from being an innocent, pure little newborn to a murderer or to a despot or to an embezzler or to a rapist? Something happened. The person isn't born that way. There's something in their environment that made them mentally unwell so that they became enraged or disconnected from their own humanity, or they felt overly victimized and they lashed out, or they had role models of violence. Something happened that set that person up. And we look for those causes in every other area of our existence for the most part. And now, of course, we have some denial around that as well in terms of climate and disease. But for the most part, we really want high tech. And our human nature is what is really failing, and we need high-tech human relations. And what I call high-tech human relations are exactly what you see in a healthy family: love, a sense of belonging, safety to have a different opinion, celebration of our diversity, valuing of each member, cooperation, empathy, supporting each other in their whatever their strivings are, and peaceful conflict resolution. That's what high-tech human relations actually are. And the opposite, low-tech, are everything we're seeing that you're talking about and that we're all suffering from. And I think, for one of the reasons why I wrote this is to identify this for the larger population.
Well, how can we elevate these principles to make a society recognize that this is something that we are going to have to deal with, or we're not going to be the same society anymore? I mean, I was watching something the other day that just really literally blew my mind. I couldn't understand for the life of me why there's a reporter at a rally for one group of people, and the woman was saying, if this person doesn't get elected, I think it's going to be time for a revolution in America. Okay, wait, excuse me. What is the revolution going to accomplish? I'm trying to figure this out for myself. Do you want us to have a revolution so that we can make hate, the national banner? I mean, I'm just, you want to be able to, get rid of this group of people, get rid of that group of people, get rid of that group of people, get rid of that group of people. And what are you going to be left with? A whole bunch of people who don't want to work for themselves? I'm just trying to figure out, what is it that you want?
Well, I think, there's so many ways to look at your question. So
Sure.
I'll try to pick one at a time. I get flooded with all the different approaches that psychology really has to offer with that. But one of them is that as a culture, I think we're addicted, we're addicts. We're addicted to power. We're addicted to control. We're addicted to righteousness. We're addicted to sex. We're addicted to so many things. It's like we can't get enough. And especially when people feel powerless in their own lives, they often identify with the aggressor, as we were talking about. And they feel like they're going to win something by having a war against those that they have identified as their enemies. If we take that and we go right back to the lens of family systems, we know that these are the qualities of an abusive family. When there is an abuser or someone who's highly dysfunctional in a family, they will justify what they do. I beat him because he failed in school. I molested her because she was wearing that short skirt. And they really come to believe that what they did in terms of harm and assault on other people actually is justified. And when you have people at the top in positions of authority who are talking about a whole population being rapists and thugs, or being, in some way less worthy or inferior, then you're creating that mindset that we don't have to treat them like we want to be treated ourselves. And
And at the end of the day, those same people who are making those comments, that same leader, and those same people who believe in that, are the same people who's, and I've said this before. It's like, we have this big problem right now with immigrants. Everybody just keep them all out. Well, yeah, okay, keep them all out. And let's figure out how well this country does in less than a year. First off, there won't be any vegetables, any fruits, any things on your shelves in grocery stores because I don't know a single white kid or black kid in America today is going out to pick anything in a field. Sorry. So, and then, let's take a look at how we clean our hotels. And I'm not casting a racial
I know.
aspersion on people, but we have people who are our healthcare providers, our daycare providers, our, people who are ambulatory assistants to people. These are mostly filled by jobs that are filled by people who are immigrants. So let's keep the immigrants out. Let's see how your grandmother gets taken care of next week. Let's keep the immigrants out. Let's see how many, hotel rooms you can go to that the sheets were changed in. I mean, I just do not understand what it is that we expect is going to happen when we isolate ourselves from others.
Well, I think what we can expect is what we're getting. And I think people really don't understand on a mass level that we're creating the violence that we're then decrying, that we don't want to have happen to us. It's okay if it happens to somebody else, but it's not okay if it happens to us. I mean, think of the outrage at 9/11. How could this possibly happen to us when we've been the aggressor all over the world?
All over the world. I'll never forget. I went to a speech with a guy by the name of, I know you know the comedian Dick Gregory, but he said something in a speech that I heard him say, and I literally, and excuse my language when I say it back to you the way he said it, was America's got a day of reckoning coming, because how can you go around the world, and he used the term, shitting on other people's children and not get your own children shit on here at home?
And how can we do that to our own people and not expect it to happen to us? Exactly.
Right.
And so,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to throw in another question. So, I mean, Phyllis, again, yesterday I did a video that I had put up that just talked about the fact that we're living in this divisive time. So maybe what we ought to do is take a break for a second. I want people to send me their positive thoughts. Send me some things that are examples of why we should be united. I mean, we look back at history. I don't think Americans really look back at our history. We look back at through filtered lenses that we don't even want to even understand or admit to. But, it was diversity that made this country survive. Most people don't remember when the Pilgrims got here. When the Pilgrims got here, they almost died because none of them could figure out how to deal with a, North American winter. And it was the Native Americans that taught them how to kill that bird called a turkey, and taught them how to go out and hunt a deer, and how to find refuge in this new land that helped them survive the first 7-8 years. It wasn't until after they helped them survive that they decided, let's kill them off and get rid of them. But, the truth of the matter is that it was diversity that helped them survive. And then we look back at every single race that was a European race that was non-Anglo-Saxon that came here. They were discriminated against for their first 5 to 6 years here, from Italians to Polish to Germans to, you name.
Right.
And then we finally allowed them to be a part because we recognized that their diversity is what helped to build America.
Right.
And forget about the fact that we were forced diversity through slavery, but it was that slavery that helped build this nation that we're here. So it was the diverse background of all those who came together to make this country the great country that it is today. And now for us to say that we don't want that diversity any longer is as ridiculous, and people need to understand that it's the lack of diversity is where our survival is right on the edge.
So one of the ways to look at this, and again, there's many, one of the ways to look at this is if we even look at who came to America. A lot of the people that came to America starting in the very beginning, but not the Native Americans who were already here.
Right. Right.
were fleeing persecution and poverty and war and prison imprisonment. Um, and there's generations of immigrants who have come here over many hundreds of years who were fleeing trauma. And they brought their trauma with them at a time when we didn't talk about psychological trauma. People were just trying to survive. And yet those traumas didn't disappear. So if we have generations of people who brought their trauma with them, then it's very likely that they're passing that on to their children. And they are. And so, one of the things that I love about the field of psychology, and going back to what I said in the beginning, is that it's nonpartisan. It's about healing relationship. It's not about dividing us. It's not about finding out even who's right or wrong. In the field of psychology, you might call out abusive behavior, but the goal is to heal. The goal is to find healing. The goal is to come back into alignment with something constructive and peaceful and loving, if at all possible. So I think we really have to study our own history through a very different lens, not who won the war, but really, why was there war? What did it actually produce? What are
And then you made the statement that we have to figure out how to balance our pride in our country with the reality that many of our systems are in desperate need of help and desperate need of being repaired.
right?
How do we achieve that balance?
I think we really have to know that the ship is sinking in a lot of ways. I think that's why people have to speak through the levels of denial that we're being fed, or that we're being conditioned to believe that really this is a battle of good and evil. The whole field of psychology doesn't ascribe to that at all. The whole field of psychology is looking for cause, if that makes sense.
Well, but Phyllis, it's kind of like, to me, that we're living in a time where this society that we live in won't even admit the fact that there is mental illness in some ways. I mean, honestly, we put so much money into, I don't want to call it healthcare. We put so much money into sick care in America
Right.
that we don't even recognize what we could be spending on healthcare that could actually reduce the cost of some of the sick care.
Which is
And
prevention, right? Right.
right, and mental health prevention and slowing down this decline is something that could actually help us and benefit us in the future if we can at least just stop for a second and acknowledge it. But when we have our politicians and we have our leaders and we have all these people in these desperate individual groups ignoring their own mental illness,
Right.
how does the public
I think we
understand it's
we
really
have to
there?
educate more and more people to call it out and say, we won't tolerate this. How does a family heal? Somebody, if it's a really dysfunctional or abusive family, somebody has to step outside the system and say what's really happening and talk about the truth of what's going on. And part of the dilemma that we face in this country is that many of our truth tellers are jailed or assaulted, or
Or afraid,
or afraid,
yeah,
or they're put
afraid.
down. Right.
I I'll tell you, I was literally, I spoke before a group. It was about 4 months ago. The group is the nation's defense intelligence agency. I literally, because of my military background, and we did a hour long presentation. I did it in front of them, and at the end of the presentation, I left some time for questions and answers. And I literally talked about some of the things that we're talking about today, but I interspersed that with the fact that we are at this point. America can open the door and figure out how to walk through it and walk through it together, or we can keep the door closed. And what happens in a closed house when you don't let anything in, no light in, no nothing in, that thing is going to destroy itself. And I had one of the people ask me a question, said, well, Montel, I mean, your views are really strong. And I think your views are views that could help this nation. Why don't you step up to the fore and even run for office? And I was like, because I don't want to die. And and I know I'm saying that, and it sounds like I'm over stating this, but I think we're living in a time right now where those voices of reason are the voices that are being silenced for a reason,
Right.
because
Right.
it's that other group that doesn't want to have other people recognize, oh, wow, maybe you are right.
Right. No, I think, and there's a history in the history of human beings of silencing people who stand for truth or for love or for cooperation or for sharing. We have many, many martyrs. I mean, look at the people who have been martyred. Um, and, again, one of the reasons why I just want to have my voice, and my voice is one of millions, is what if we could listen to our martyrs before they get killed? What if we actually could hear their message? What if we start talking that way, and more people talk about the messages of peace and love, and that really being our ultimate sustainability?
So, Phyllis, I mean, how do we get the message across? And I understand what you said about, people stepping up to the plate and sharing, but is this something that we, first off, I mean, do we get a movement of other psychologists like yourself, psychiatrists like yourself, who can step in and say, look, at the, elementary school level, let's start talking more about, inclusiveness and empathy and things like that? I mean, is that how we go? Do we have to just skip this generation that's here right now and try to see if we can focus on the next one to help us survive?
Well, I definitely think it's a many pronged approach for sure. And that's a good one.
Mhm.
One of the things that I advocate is that we start teaching about family dynamics and healthy family dynamics in our schools as just part of our curriculum. What happens in groups? What are cult dynamics? What is abuse? And make it safe for children or adults to come forward and actually talk about what is happening to them without fear of retribution. And that's a big one, of course. But education, I can't stress education enough, because when I first went to therapy, when I was in my 30s, I didn't have a clue about psychology. Understanding what happened to me as a child and the imprint that that left on my life changed my life. It changed my life. And I think we need to know that what happens to us with other people, for better or for worse, is either going to have a positive or a terribly negative impact on us as individuals and our collective mental health and well-being.
I mean, I almost feel like if we know that social media is exacerbating this mental health crisis in America, but I also think that it could actually be one of the saving graces in America. If we were to get like 10 of you together, if I can get me 10 Phyllises and open up a TikTok channel where we just literally started from the top of the day till the end of the day, just sending out nothing but message after message. I need 24 of them, because I need each one of you on for an hour straight, just throwing out videos, talking about, I think it would get attention, especially if I had, you know,
Right,
24 of you and give me 24 of you that are, excuse me, and this is not an aspersion, but 24 of you that are 18 to 24 years old. You know what
right,
I'm saying? We need
right.
to have that generation talk to themselves and
Totally.
explain to themselves that they need to pay attention to what's going on inside of here.
Yeah. And that's what I actually hope will happen, that we will start to mobilize around what is constructive, what is actually sustainable, what's life-giving. I don't know one person, and I don't believe there's one person who actually wants their house to be bombed, or their children to be put in cages, or to be deprived of a living wage, or to be hated for the color of their skin. We don't want these things for ourselves. And it's a mental health issue that we allow them and condone them to be done to other people. And that's why I keep coming back to mental health. So how do we foster better mental health on a societal level? Certainly education is one of them. I think that one of the things that we really need to do is to call out what we're seeing. We're seeing behaviors in Congress that children would be thrown out of their schools if they were behaving that way. They would be suspended. They would be referred for therapy. Somebody would say, what's going on in their family? And we have to say, what's going on in the family of America, that we tolerate this, that some people even enjoy it.
Right.
Um, but let me just, I want to just, if it's okay with you, I want to come back to bedrock for a minute,
Sure.
because One of the things that I think is really bedrock that I think the world of psychology and family systems and therapy has to offer is that we're so invested in pointing the finger. You know, when a couple comes to therapy, most often they want the therapist to side with them against their
Validate. Yeah.
right? Show my partner that they're wrong, that they have the wrong attitude, they said the wrong thing, they're doing blah, blah. But the other person feels exactly the same way. And so, and I'll share this with you. I've shared this many times, but it's really stayed with me because it's become kind of bedrock in my life. And when I'm talking about individuals or a country, I had an instructor in a couples therapy class when I was in graduate school. And the one thing that he said that I've never forgotten was this. He said, the couples that do the best are the people who focus on taking responsibility for their part in whatever is going on, not the people who keep pointing fingers and blaming and shaming and acting out. That doesn't mean I'm responsible if you hit me. It doesn't mean that. But taking responsibility might mean I really look at myself. You know, am I restraining my most negative impulses toward you? Am I shouting? Am I rolling my eyes when you talk? Do I look the other way when you're trying to speak from your heart? What could I reflect on about myself? What am I really after with you? Do I just want to make you wrong, or do I really want to reconnect with you and find a place of agreement and cooperation and love? What could I be responsible for? Maybe I need to make amends to you for something that I said or did that was unkind or hurtful or upsetting or caused you pain. Can I be committed? Can I be committed to actually taking responsibility for myself? And the reason why I emphasize this so strongly, whether we're talking about an individual or a couple or a family or a community or a country or a world of human beings, is that when one person is able to take responsibility for their own behavior, and especially if they're really able to make amends. Most of us have done something that's hurt somebody. You know, we're not all just victims. Out of our own hurt, inadvertently, we've hurt other people, sometimes intentionally out of our own pain. But when one person really steps up and takes responsibility, it opens the door for other people to do that too. What if, as a country, we could say, we really committed atrocity for the Native Americans, for the people that we enslaved, the Black people that we brought over from Africa, that we're still committing atrocities against women, against minorities? What if we could actually own our own missteps?
But, you know, in order to do that, you have to have people understand that accepting responsibility is not guilt.
That's right.
And
That's
when
right.
and the guilt that they feel is what they feel. It's not something perpetrated on them. And that's the reason why there are so many states in this country right now trying to rewrite history books as if
Right.
slavery didn't exist. Rewrite
Right.
history books as if we weren't the nation that we were when we were founded and what was going on here for the first 100 years. But there were so many atrocities committed amongst not only us against other people or other races, but there were atrocities that we committed against ourselves
That's
that we
right.
won't even admit to.
I know.
So, you know, I got to tell you, I'm enjoying the heck out of this conversation, lady. You don't know. And I say that in a nice way. I really wish we could continue on and we had much more time. So I'm going to have to beg you to come back, please.
I
When we,
would love it. I would love it. I'll be on your panel of, you know, people that talk about this all day long. Because really it's the more voices that are speaking this, then the more people can actually hear a different lens on what's going on today.
you know, maybe what we ought to do, let's do something like this. Why don't you think about it? But I know you have other psychiatrists, psychologists like yourself who feel this way. Let's
Right.
put together, you know, a 2-3 person panel. Let's just have another conversation.
That'd be amazing.
Bring us on together and let's do this. Okay.
I would love it.
I'm
I know one person right off the bat, and do you want like two
I
people?
think, hey, Keith, let me bring my producer in real quick. Hey, Keith, holler at me for a second. Yes, sir. What do you think? Let's talk to Mel and see how many could you handle. Could we handle 4? Could there be 4 people total? 3 people? No, we want to stick it to 3.
Yeah, it can only be 3 people total, which means her and one other person.
Okay.
Okay, so if you give us one other, Phyllis, give us one other, and then we'll do this again, and let's chop it up so that we'll have on record, we don't need people who don't agree. We just need people with a different perspective, and let's just talk through it. But I think the more and more we talk, the more and more things like this can be heard. The more and more those people who have tuned into this particular episode they're gonna reach out to their friends and say, you got to watch this thing with Montel and Phyllis. That was really wild. I mean, we're talking about something that, I think it's just sparking conversation, which could help save a nation.
Yeah. And let me say, in my book, I really go very deep with some of this. And, in a 40-minute conversation, it's hard to get to some of the
Sure.
deeper cuts, but we're really talking about a major shift in the Earth's axis in terms of our human relations. And that's the climate change that we really need to address is our human nature and our human relations. That's the climate that really needs to be addressed.
I'm going to agree with you 1,000,000% and say, let's get it done. So for all of you out there who've enjoyed today's conversation, send us some information, send me some comments and let me know you really liked it. But I'm going to have Phyllis come back. Please, Phyllis, I want to thank you for being here today. I barely scratched the surface, like you said, 40 minutes to an hour. That's not enough time, but let's keep doing it until we get it right.
Yeah, no, we're getting it right. I just think that there's so many different angles to look at that are just a different lens on what we're being fed. And I really think people are hungry for that. I really do.
So Phyllis, I'm going to thank you so much for being here. And look, if people want to get more information about you and get a copy of the book, where would they go?
Yes, absolutely. The book is called America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. It's available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the major bookstores. And you can find me on my website, which is www.phyllisleavitt.com. And there's lots of information about my book. You can order the book off of my website. You can contact me. I'm happy to talk to anyone. I'm on I'm on LinkedIn and Substack. I have articles and I have lots of videos on YouTube and, I'm on the major sites, but probably the best place to find me is on my website.
Okay. Thank you so much. And go ahead and make sure you guys look her up and see if you can get a copy of the book yourself. We are going to do this again. So I'm looking forward to you joining us again for another inspiring episode of Free Thinking with Montel. I'm going to call it Free Thinking with Montel and Phyllis. Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for being a part. Yes, ma'am. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments.